What's going on, team? Proof here, and today I kind of like a hybrid video that's like kind of like one part card review look at, and then another part is replay footage of using those cards. And I think last Wednesday, before the release of the special preview, I should say, of the first episode, there was a special stream where they showcased a bunch of Dark States cards, a lot of which supported Bruce, and then also the Dark States Overtrigger. So what I wanted to do first is kind of talk about the cards that I'm going to use the most in these replays, and kind of give my initial impressions of them, and then go into some replays using those cards. And yeah, so the first card I want to talk about is Proto Bulb Dragon, which is a grade 1 for Dark States, and it says auto on rear guard. When this unit attacks or boosts, if you are in Final Rush, counterblast 1, put another of your rear guards into your soul, choose a card from your soul and put it into your hand. So this card is a nice recycle element, being able to get you, because a lot of the Final Rush, or not a lot of it, but there are instances in the Final Rush deck for Bruce where you're randomly soul charging cards. So by doing so, you kind of lose out maybe like a trigger or a perfect guard here and there. And Proto Bulb allows you to absorb one of your other rear guards that have done attacking or boosting, and then exchange that card for a defensive measure such as the trigger or a perfect guard in your soul. Or as another bonus, you can also recycle Bruce's that you have persona ridden, because when you persona ride, you'll have another one in your soul. So with Proto Bulb, you can take the one that's in your soul and put it back to your hand and be able to chain together persona rides that way. So it's a really efficient card, and Counterblast isn't a cost that has a lot of competition for the Bruce deck, so it makes it a really solid card overall. And I really enjoyed using it, and hopefully the replays you see today kind of help showcase that as well. In the grade 2 slot, we got Diabolos Boys Eden, and he says continuous on rear guard. If you are in Final Rush, this unit gets plus 5,000 power, and if this unit stands this turn by card effect, aka Bruce's ability, it gets plus 1 critical. Auto on rear guard. When his unit's attack hits, counterblast 1, choose one of your opponent's rear guards and retires it. So Eden is really strong, and I can see why it got triple rare honors for set 1, because it gets 5,000 power for being in Final Rush, which is equivalent to what Richard does, which is the start deck card. And then in addition to that, it has synergy with Bruce himself to when you restand, he gets an additional critical, which allows you to have some fun with your opponent's hand and resources, because you might be able to lock them into less counterblast for their following turn after they've used a lot of resources to try to protect themselves. So that makes it really good. And then on another positive for it is that it has implications before you're in Final Rush, because the second skill doesn't require you to be in Final Rush to use it. So early game, if your opponent is trying to be aggressive with you and try to rush you down because you're a Bruce deck and you need to live to turn 4 to try to finish your opponent off with Final Rush skills, Eden can punish that by 2 for 1 of your opponent's rear guards by attacking into one, and then if it hits, you can counterblast 1 and retire another of your opponent's rear guards, because Eden doesn't require you to hit your opponent's Vanguard to activate. So it becomes a very strong offensive measure later in the game, but it also has a solid defensive application to it as well earlier in the game, and that's what makes it really good. And then the last card I'm going to feature in this video is Upward Acrobat Marjorie, which is a grade 3. And she says auto on rear guard once per turn. When this unit attacks, if you are in Final Rush, cost, put one of your other rear guards into your soul, draw a card, soul charge 1, and then she herself gets plus 10,000 power to the end of turn, which is important, not end of battle, because that means that you can attack with her pre-Bruce. She gets plus 10,000 power, and then on the restand, she will carry that power over to your subsequent attacks. And she's also important because she can soul charge 1. Actually, she's an effective soul charge 2, because you put 1 into your soul and soul charge, which means if you're at 3 soul prior to Bruce attacking, then you get to 5 via Marjorie, which is very important. And then on the plus side, or additional plus side I want to say, she allows you to recycle a rear guard into a random draw, which could be relevant for you to dig for maybe a perfect guard or defensive measure to help you live the following turn. So she has very good tempo prior to you trying to finish the game, and then if you're trying to finish the game with like a persona ride restand turn, she becomes 33,000 power for the duration of the turn through her ability, which is really good as well. And she doesn't really conflict at the moment. Well, there's competition there between her and Colossus from the trial deck, or from the start deck, I should say. And for me personally, as you're going to see in this video, I still incorporated some Colossi, what I don't know what the plural is, into the deck, because to me it offered good power redundancy between the two of them. And for me, having Darksays with power is what I really wanted to do, since you already get the restand element via Bruce, and it offers some good synergy there from my perspective. And then the Darksays overtrigger was also revealed, and I struggle with his name, so I'm going to give it a shot again. But he is Hades, Dragon Deity of Resentment, Galmagelg. And he says, of course, when he's an overtrigger, choose one of your units and gets 100 million power to the end of turn. And then for the additional effect, which activates when you drive check it, it says during your turn, all of your Vanguards get power plus 10,000 and critical plus 1 until the end of this fight, not to the end of turn. So this card, like, the earlier that you can check it, if you check it offensively, the better, obviously. And that means you can help steamroll the value of having plus 10,000 power and a crit for the duration of the fight, which really adds up on your opponent. And it offers some fun interaction with Eden if your opponent is at 4 damage, because the Eden on Reese, like if you have Bruce and Eden ready to go, if Eden can throw the first attack into a rear guard, because you know on the restand it's going to have the additional critical, and then your Vanguard is going to have an automatic critical. So it kind of leaves your opponent in a weird spot, because if they let Eden hit, they lose 2 rear guards in the process. If they choose to protect the rear guard, then that's 1 less card to protect themselves against this incoming Bruce with overtrigger abilities, and then Eden on restand with an additional critical, and then whatever else you have going on as well. It's not necessarily outright better than Alberia, the Cray Elemental overtrigger, because Alberia is better if you check it later. However, Galmagelg is better if you check it earlier. So it's all about a timing and what you would prefer to see from your overtrigger, because the opposite is also true in that Alberia is weaker if you check it earlier, and then Galmagelg is weaker if you check it later, because then the critical may not matter as much because your opponent might already be guarding your Vanguard. It could matter if your opponent guards you for a trigger to pass or 2 to pass and you check the overtrigger, but in case of your opponent checking the if your opponent throwing down perfect guards, then it doesn't matter as much. But all in all, I really do like it. I think it's a strong overtrigger, and hopefully these games, because I do check it a couple times in these games, I won't tell you where, but hopefully you can see it in action, and hopefully that you can kind of evaluate how you think it will do in the course of the games going forward. So yeah, that'll do it for all the cards I wanted to talk about, and then I'll catch you in the replays. So this first game here is against Keter Sanctuary, the Bastion version, and what you like to do is try to stay at low damage here to be able to soak the later attacks, because over the course of the turn the Bastion deck gets bigger for their numbers, so you kind of want to use your guard a little aggressively to be able to help stem the bleeding a little bit. And my hand is very solid. Generally speaking, I wanted to keep Eden in my hand as my first game with it. I really wanted to try to use it. So I opted to keep Eden in my hand, and I opted to keep Brody in my hand because I thought these would be good options to have early on for some hybrid defense. And then I ended up drawing another Eden, a crit, and perfect guard. So I'm going second in this game, which it helps emphasize the need to help keep it low damage, so that way you can survive until your final Russian. But pitch draw trigger, ride Steve, soul charge, call Matt, and draw a card. Very simple, slow gameplay because I didn't have an additional grade 1. And then my opponent rides Rooks, ends up calling the heal off of the Fort ability. Reveal 2 grade 3s, reveal top, call it if it's a unit, otherwise put into the drop. And now they opt to be aggressive, and I ended up taking both of these because I wanted to maintain some cards in my hand for their grade 3 turn. And then maybe I'd hit a draw trigger here, and I had double Eden. So I really wanted to make sure that I could activate if need be. I'm not necessarily correct to double commit the Edens, but I really wanted to try it out in the first game using it. And I thought I could protect it to try to beat down on an Eden later. And I chose to try to be aggressive and guard the Eden here, but I had to let one go because Bastion's constant +2 to grade 3s makes good numbers on my 10Ks. And he checked a crit and a grade 3 and gave everything to Refluke. But then I used my overtrigger that I saw off of, I believe I got off of Richard's skill, because otherwise I would have checked it. And used the guard. So I stayed at low damage and defended at least one Eden to probably use it later and put some pressure on my opponent's guard for later. So I ride Bruce, call presenter back here to make a number with Eden to try to hit something, and then Brody on the board versus in hand doesn't really matter, so I hope to check a trigger and pass the power to Brody so that way it can become a threat on another rear guard. Unfortunately, I whiff. And then Eden went in the rear guard, but he protected it. No Bastion persona ride, so it kind of just draw, enter combat, and go. Check 2 grade 3s though, so which help lower the defenses. So I take these, go to 4, and now I'm ready to persona ride. I did weigh the option of not persona riding, but I thought it'd be better just to get the draw, and I ended up netting myself a Colossus, which is huge here. And then I set up this board here. You're gonna see us do like a small rewind because I forgot the soul charge with Colossus, just heads up there. But I call Marjorie with a Steve back here. Steve is in final rush, so this is 23 plus 13, which is, or it's going to be 33 plus 13, which is 46 on the restand. Colossus here is also 46 on the restand. And then Bruce is going to be 23 because I'm going to absorb with Marjorie ahead of time. Go Marjorie first, do her skill, absorb, draw, soul charge. Go Colossus here. Didn't get any triggers to help make this a little bit easier to protect themselves, because Marjorie being 33 would have forced 2 triggers out of my opponent's hand. Soul Blast 5, restand, and then just take it on the chin and hope for the best. Saw a heal. You saw there's another heal in hand, so heal there. There was 1 heal and 1 overtrigger left, so better weigh your odds there and see if you can survive the turn at this rate. But yeah, that'll do it for game 1. And then these were all best of 3, so I'm gonna get over to game 2 right now. All right, game 2. What's my opening hand looking like? I don't remember. So we got Steve, Bruce, Eden. I think I just tossed the draw trigger and drew a card, because then with an extra grade 1 in hand, I could be aggressive early game if I'm going second against Keter and take advantage of them not having a lot of cards in their hand, or not a lot of shield value, I should say. But I got it back anyway, so it didn't even matter. Toss that soul charge, draw, and then I believe I called the Steve here and then went two attacks, or at least weighed the option to do so. I opted to do it. And then I got a crit in the process. So reveal 2, reveal the order. Since he revealed the order goes to drop, which is big sad. And then check the front trigger, so even more. This is a really slow start for the Keter deck. I tossed the crit that I checked the previous turn because I really wanted to keep all the other cards in my hand. And then the choice here was to okay. Drew the Brody, which gave me, I can save the Eden for the following turn. Check the overtrigger, which becomes a heal draw technically. And then Brody was going to attack here. He just let it go. Reveal 3, draw 1. Unfortunately, that overtrigger became a negative kind of sorta to my opponent, because they had Alden and another Alden, and they also had the order in hand, and both Alden and the order require 2 counter blasts to work. So they wanted to go to 4 to use Alden to draw 2, and then use either another Alden or the order to draw 2 more to help just get some of these dead cards out of their hand and try to turn it into something of value. But hitting the overtrigger left them at 3 damage, which reduced that likelihood. So now we got full front row. And then I believe I guarded this one because it would have been tougher to guard the Alden and the Bastion later because they made perfect numbers. And I think my opponent realized, my opponent's blue. I'm gonna click on my opponent. Blue realized that he should have went Alden first, but he figured he was gonna check a grade 3 anyway. And would just give it and then toss a grade 3 to help reduce some of the dead cards in their hand. So I set up Proto Bulb. I chose to go here. If I had gone face, I would have revealed the over trigger. Maybe he would have let it go, who knows, and then would have gone to 5. But I did check the over trigger, which meant Bruce is now live for +10 and a crit for the rest of the game. And then 100 million power to Eden, which I threw into Vanguard. And then of course that dies with the counterblast skill. Persona Ride Bastion now has 2 more counterblasts to work with for another Alden skill. Get Refluke back, or bring out another Refluke, I should say. I believe he just absorbed this one and then called out the other grade 3s in his hand. Yeah. So this was hefty. And I had two PGs to work with, so I could soak up. I could defend against some shenanigans of like heal or like crit grade 3 type of stuff. And then I go into my Persona Ride, I draw into another draw trigger. And then I was weighing the options here of what I wanted to do with my cards because I had Eden. I had Eden over here, I had Margin, I had Colossus. I didn't think I could kill this turn, so I wanted to try to get as much value as I could and save the Colossus for next turn or for PG fodder. So I went for a more value turn, which is turning Marjorie into a 33k by filtering my draw trigger into something else. So this card here is going to be auto absorbed, and then Bruce here, let me back up. Eden here was going to restand at some point in time. I chose to put Alberia back here just to give me a mental cue that Bruce is going to have 10k in the crit as long as I didn't call something over it, and well, we all agree that it was fine. So I believe Eden went first into a rear guard. Now I think this is like a misplay on my part. I went into Alden and then I blew up the rooks back here. It may have been better to go into Alden and blow up Refluke because Refluke can just go on the soul and give something +10 after the fact. So maybe that was better. You guys tell me. But I did what I did because I thought I could get rooks out the way and stop it from being a 15k booster and help myself survive a little bit better. That's why I did that. So this is 33. Got that, that's unfortunate, but blue had the PGs anyway. So this restands. Perfect guard, got a PG and a crit. And then just to look at what my soul had at the moment, it was just a PG and a Bruce. So I believe I used Proto Bulb on the Marjorie to turn her into a perfect guard to help myself survive the next turn. Yep. The option was there to pick up the Bruce, but considering that I'm at 4 damage against Keter, it was the safer play was to go for the perfect guard and then lock him at 1 damage so he can't use Alden or Bastion. So Alden comes in for 30. I think I opted to take this to play around a heal trigger check here. So perfect guard, grade 1, grade 3, and then toss everything, survive. Would have healed. But now I'm in not over rush, I'm in final rush. So Colossus becomes 28k, which is relevant. This becomes 23k, which is also relevant. Unfortunately, I don't have 5 cards in soul. I think if I held on to Marjorie instead, I could have triggered Bruce's ability with the Marjorie in hand. No, I still would have been 1 short because I had 2 to start with. So I still would have been 1 short. So try to make do with what I had. I was just showing my triggers, my crit triggers. I did hit a heal. And then my deck is built under the assumption that I really want to get that Refluke off, kind of realizing my other mistake and want to get the Refluke off the board. But the decks were built under the idea that the other decks or the nations are going to get a full set of triggers in the set. So I built mines with additional crits and draws and took the fronts out. So I was kind of weighing if I wanted to guard the Alden or if I wanted to take the Alden or guard Alden, take the Bastion attack. I think either way I was kind of screwed as long as he whiffed on, he needed to whiff on a grade 3 check here. I would have been fine, but that's not likely in the in Blue's deck. Cause I was dead to a grade. I could have guarded for 1 to pass for 28, but a trigger would have gotten through, and then I would have needed a trigger myself to survive. It was the combination of stuff to happen was very small, a small window to work with. So I only had enough to guard 1 additional attack, and I was 1 short. But that's game 2. Let's put over to game 3 real quick. And then in this one, I got to go first. So we get to see the Dark States deck operate from a going first perspective. My hand's not fantastic. A lot of triggers. I tossed Marjorie because she doesn't matter early on. So I figured I'd get it out the way. Toss a trigger, get that, see what I drew into. Just make columns and go was my idea, and protect Eden. Thankfully, the Dark States deck, the Keter deck can't be aggressive to counter my aggression early on because Rooks is probably the only grade 2 in the deck. So this is a very easy guard for Eden. Top deck into Bruce for Final Rush. Hit a crit, push to 4. So I'm really set up in a good way for a Final Rush turn. And now taking all this to go and draw additional cards. And be as aggressive as possible. I knew Eden was gonna die here, but I figured if I protect it, it could throw the Vanguard swing away from my face. And then take that, draw, probably take this one too. Or I could protect it with 38, chose to protect it. Taking it because of this, I had a feeling I was gonna check it, but I didn't trust in it during the time of the game. But I ended up going with this because this is what my hand gave me. So I have 3 proto bulbs on the board. And the tricky part here is trying to figure out what of these 4 cards was going to trigger, because Protobulb can trigger on attacking or boosting. So I had to figure out if I wanted to throw 2 counter blasts into it, or if I wanted to keep this one around for boost and Bruce. It was a weird combination of things going on. I don't know exactly what's right now, but we'll see how it played out. And took a lot of time pondering it too. I chose to go here, unboosted, no skill. Marjorie absorbed, I believe, this Proto Bulb, so that way this can remain a 38k column. Vanguard, Soul Blast 5. Restand. I got another Bruce back, which allowed me to not have to get this Bruce back. So it left me the ability to get the perfect guard. When I Soul Blasted, I knew I had the perfect guard here. So I strategically Soul Blasted to keep the Bruce and the perfect guard together. Guard with the over trigger, and then this triggers. And then I chose to keep the Marjorie around. I could have triggered both of them and turned the Marjorie into another Bruce, but at least this way, it still is a relevant attacker. So I can take these. Just see what I get, and then I can protect as need be. And then Persona Ride, draw another Proto Bulb. I tossed this one just because this makes a relevant number. Now this is a funny interaction. Acrobat activates on attacking or boosting. So on boost of the Marjorie, you can trigger the Acrobat to soul charge 2 because you're final rushing and you're on Bruce. And then you can absorb the Acrobat with Marjorie to trigger her ability. And then you can turn it into the draw, soul charge, etc. as you need to. It does reduce Marjorie's power to 33, but this allows you to keep double Proto Bulb around if you want to. And so he took that, didn't have the guard to sustain against all 5 of my attacks. And I believe the over trigger was incoming, so it would have made the turn much more scarier. But that was the games against Keter. Let's move on to the games against Orfist. So Orfist is a new card that was also recently revealed in that it has these world cards, Howling Moon Knight and In the Darkness Nobody Knows. These are set order cards that go into your set order zone or into your order zone, and then if you have 1 there, you are in Dark Knight, and then if you have 2 or more, you're in Abyssal Dark Knight. And then they have additional abilities to make up for the fact that they basically are net negatives on the board. So try to make use of these to get into Abyssal Dark Knight mode, and then use Orfist's ability to counterblast 2 and generate 3 shadow tokens. That's the general consensus right now. It's not fully fleshed out, but there's more that's going to be incoming as well. We have the grade 2 of it, Kubica. When a world is put into your order zone, choose one of your units gets +5. And while that's on Vanguard, so you do this on turn 2 after you ride, call some stuff out, play an order card, give something else +5. And then continuous on rear guard during your turn if you are Abyssal Dark Knight in your world, get +5,000 power. So it becomes 15k to go along with the 15k shadow tokens, which make nice beefy numbers early on. So the idea is just to use the tokens to help generate advantage and try to protect yourself that way. Just attack with big beefy columns. So this is a much different matchup to go up against than the Keter deck, which is 4 attacks that are beefy, but they lose out on advantage by having they lose out on shield value by having grade 3s in hand. Can't remember what I was doing here, but I took a time to do something. Toss Colossus because it's not needed right now. Get the refund back. What I should have done here, I should have played one of these 2 to be aggressive early game, at least have the ability to force a card out of their hand. But I took it slow, I guess, just because of not unfamiliar territory. But definitely should have taken one of these down, or put one of these down and attack with it. Would have paid off too. But plays Howling Moonlit Night, Soul Blast 1 to play it, then draw a card. The other one is Soul Blast 1 to play it, and then you retire one of your opponent's rear guards. This card's really cool too. Gordog, when it's discarded, you can counterblast 1 if you have a set order and call it. Really nice card. Attack here, check a Brucey, and then go here for 18k, guard for 20. And now has 2 counterblasts, and then very easily set up the second one to filter, and then you get the shadow tokens by counterblasting 2, because you have 2 basically you have 2 world cards, your Abyssal Dark Knight, and you're good to go. So you save all these cards in hand so you don't have to call them, as long as the shadow tokens don't get removed. And then check the over trigger, which put me in a spot to where I had to take all of these. But it's fine, because it's just 3 attack deck, so I just need to make sure that I have enough guard to survive 3 big attacks. So I pitched another Marjorie here, going to Bruce, just to save myself some guard. And since Marjorie wasn't live until the next turn, call Eden here. Eden can at least get the non-shadow token stuff off the board if necessary. I forgot that I missed the trigger for Presenter, so I fixed it real quick by just putting the draw trigger into my soul. You'll see in a little bit. Arguably, I could have went here and got those 2 off the board, but then he would have just played. He could have just used Orfist's ability to call 2 more shadow tokens out. So there still would have been 30Ks, 30 here, 28, 30. But now it's 40, 38, 40. Now 40, 43, 35 now. So I perfect guard this. Crit 1, crit 2, which is unfortunately the only combination of triggers that would have lost me the game there. Because I could guard against 1 crit swing being big with the Brodies, but I couldn't guard against 2 of them without hitting my over trigger or hitting the heal trigger. So lost that one by just some unfortunate checks at the end there. But onward to game 2. So I'm going first. Put the triggers back. Got a couple triggers back. Kept the proto bulb in case I needed it for later. Toss Marjorie, just because don't need a grade 3 final rush card on turn 1. But that's why we have, I played 4 of each of them just to get a feel for them. And I believe I tossed a trigger here to go into Richard. Set up columns, efficient columns, hit over a trigger, nice. It's important to note that you can be aggressive, as I learned against the current Orfist stuff that we had, because the grade 3 order is a grade 3, so they can't really punish you early game. Checked my over trigger, so got a heal draw out the deal, but I did lose the ability to use it offensively going forward. And then I believe I tossed, I think I was stuck between tossing Marjorie or Colossus. I chose to toss the Colossus here. Get the draw trigger, counter draw trigger. This was just, I remember this one. This was just a really sad game that saw 1 order early, but never drew. They got the order from the grade 1 piece of the chain. This one, when placed on Vanguard, search your deck for a world card, put it to your hand. But they never saw an additional order card before getting to Orfist, which means you can't trigger Orfist on turn 3 because you only play 1 order a turn. So that ideally you get the order, and then between turn 1 and turn 3 you play 2 of them to be able to trigger Abyssal Dark Knight mode. So without having Abyssal Dark Knight mode active, your deck is vanilla, because, well, largely vanilla, because Orfist only triggers when you're an Abyssal Dark Knight for his Counterblast 2 ability. So I go Persona Ride into Final Rush, set up the board, very mean board for just being very aggressive and taking advantage of the slower tempo that they have from being vanilla. Turn that into a perfect guard through Proto Bulb, and then Marjorie can go. The better order there, I believe. Yeah, the better order. I think I did this because it threatened to crit and I had a feeling that they would take the 5th damage from Marjorie anyway, which is why I opted to go Marjorie second, because Marjorie going first would have put them to 5 and risking a trigger to help make this easier to guard. I didn't want that. So slightly awkward, but I thought it was still overall effective. And then of course they didn't draw into another set order card or another world card, so they're still vanilla outside of their Persona Ride. So they get the power from it, they just don't get the extra benefit, unfortunately. Then I just guard and then defend against double crit check by being at 2 damage. I go into another Persona Ride and have pretty much the same board as last time. And like the value really started to steamroll here. Go Eden, and then Marjorie's gonna absorb Jake here, which puts me to 5 soul exactly. And I thought it was a concession. I couldn't remember. Well, this would have did it anyway. But basically, if this wasn't here, I would have been able to be at 5 anyway. Got the additional 2 soul. So I'm at 7, which made Proto Bowl be able to absorb the presenter and have my pick of what I wanted to bring him back. I probably would have gotten Bruce in this situation because I had 3 perfect guards to help myself survive my opponent's following turn. But that game really showed what could happen if Orfist just dead draws and you can't find another order card. It's kind of like Mole 5 for orders is what I've been told for at least one of them, because you get one for free off of the grade 1. So you want a Mole 5 to find the second one, and then you're good to go for the rest of the game. And then it looks like grabbing Holland Knight because it's a grade 2 order. Well, never mind. You can't play this on turn 1 because it's a grade 2 order. So you definitely need to have this one or any combination of them just ready to go. If they have a grade 1 order as a world card, that'll set them up really well too. But looks like I got punished for being aggressive, unfortunately. Set up efficient columns. I did check the overtrigger early, so that was really important. So quickly go to 4 because the overtrigger gave crit and then 100 million power over here. Use the grade 3 order to retire my Brody. And then I hit the wrong button and generated a shadow token. But they set this up here. Oh, they go the four tokens, or sorry, counterblast 4 for 5 tokens. Just efficient because then they can hold all those other cards in their hand for later. So I go to 4 myself. And then I pitch probably Colossus here to survive. Actually, no, I tossed the Bruce. I wanted to hold the Colossus and I had 2 Bruces in my hand. Very awkward setup here. Very slow turn. But my Vanguard here was +10 in the crit, so they had to do something about it. Now I gave all Vanguard because they gave me a 2 to pass. I thought it was a worthwhile endeavor. A Persona Ride, so now we have 40, 43, 40 going on. Filter. I thought it was gonna be another game 1 situation where they double crit me when I don't have the means to guard it. I think I had it this time, but it would have been tight. And then I did some bad math there, and then to guard the crit. But I Persona Ride, and I got double Eden set up. So I have double Eden with Bruce ready to go, and my opponent is at 4 damage. So I can poke and then retire 1, poke and retire 1, and then I can go Vanguard with the +10 in the crit from the overtrigger, and then restand Edens, and they both have critical pressure. Which is exactly what happened here. I took out the one behind Vanguard because that's just a very efficient booster, and I didn't want them to have that. Force them to have the Persona Ride for the power. And I think I could have won here if I gave the crit and power over here, because this was already 38k and then this was 33, so this would have been 43k, which would have been a better number. So they had an additional lease on life, especially because they got the Persona Ride. Unfortunately, they drew into a heal, which meant that they could have taken it and lived. If they had to take one, because they would have guarded this one, take this one, and they would have lived. But hindsight's always 20/20, right? And I believe I was in a position here because I didn't see the overtrigger that I had to risk a critical. And it's really interesting to see how the overtrigger added such a new wrinkle to the game, because I could have given the Vanguard a double trigger guard, which would have been 2 to pass in old Vanguard, but now it's like 2 to pass or overtrigger, and that's where it's always gets scary. So I'd like risk it for the biscuit. And actually thinking back, it may have been better to risk the overtrigger than the crit, because if I guarded heavily and they saw the overtrigger, I lost anyway. But at least if I guarded against the crit, they didn't have that. But then if I did guard for the crit, they could have given it over here. This would have been 35, and then the garden would have been really tight, because I could have went here in Eden. That would have been, no, I needed to go with 2 triggers to go to 43. If you hit a crit, this would have been 35, and then I would have been No, I would have had it because it would have been 38. I mean 28 and then 38. So yeah, it would have been better to guard the crit, and then I guess I only lost in a situation where they double triggered, or if it was like a crit over trigger, I was dead anyway. But if they double trigger and gave it all here, I would have lost. But to be safe, I could have guarded two triggers here and not take the unnecessary risk of losing to a crit trigger. That would have been better. But I'm in final rush mode. Play Colossus here, go to 28k. This comes 13 or 15, this becomes 13. And I got the proto bulb to see if I needed to grab something out. And then I have the acrobat here to put me at 6 to be able to restand. So guard that. Soul charge 2. Hits the over trigger. And now I choose to bring a perfect guard back and then attack into the shadow token. So now this game goes on for an additional turn. And that's where like just that extra element of the over trigger makes the little more unpredictable, but it still makes it exciting in my opinion. And I think we're back here in the position where now that I've seen the over trigger, I felt more confident in protecting against the Vanguard swing here. And then I can soak this up with like some Brody action or Eden action. I chose to go Brody here for 10k intercept and protect and save the perfect guard in my hand. And now I got Marjorie here. Since Marjorie's doesn't use counterblast, then she's just free power. Oh, I did Persona right. Did I Persona right? No, I didn't Persona right. Why not? For some reason I thought I Persona road. But that's okay. But that's okay. Restand the squad. I was getting low on deck at this point too. It was really tight. Apples was weighing the 1 to pass and I got it. So breakthrough. And then it had enough to protect everything else but me hitting the trigger there, I believe. So it was really close against Orfist. And as Orfist gets more stuff, it's going to get much more efficient. And just having the ability to generate free cards off of the shadow army is, I keep saying efficient a lot, but that's really what it is. It's just kind of blast to generate 45,000 in power across 3 bodies, which is insane value. And it's going to be intriguing to see what becomes of it once it becomes a little more consistent with the world cards. But that'll do it for the Orfist games. Let's go into these Stoicheia games. So similar to Keter, going against Magnolia is an exercise in trying to stay lower damage to be able to soak up more for their later turns, because currently they lose a lot of steam if you check a defensive trigger early in their turn sequence. So the idea is just to guard early where possible and keep yourself the ability to soak up some damage later. I could have guarded that one, but I chose to take it and save the guard in my hand for later and try to get a little more value out of the crit trigger guard. Maybe to protect a rear guard or something. Net the Duger off top, the majestic stallion himself. Double Duger, double stallion. And this one, Knives wasn't in voice chat, so this is gonna be looking more like your traditional CFA game. Pitch this for Bruce. I did go first this game, that's important to note. And then Eden just threatened the Duger. Lattice pull to front, goes back here. Duger to the back, and then call out Mantis. Mantis gives power. This is a nice little combo, nice little 1-2 punch. This gives power, then this can give power over here, just to make a nice efficient number. So I hit double trigger here. I chose to give it all to Vanguard to help defend against a just an onslaught on my Vanguard. Duger is enough to hit, which is unfortunate because I hit just a massive number of grade 3s in my hand. So I Persona Ride, get a perfect guard, which is very, very needed. I didn't have a perfect guard in Soul, which is important to note. I chose to just toss a Marjorie here for the one in front to get it out of my hand and filter for a new card at this point, because I thought I needed it. So I went here, force value out the deal. Tried to filter the Marjorie, got a grade 3 back anyway. Sad. Soul charge 2 because of this, and then this gives, by being able to soul charge 2 here, it gives me more targets in soul. Unfortunately, I did get the heal trigger, which I believe I put back into my hand because I had the Bruce already in hand. But it doesn't really help me just because I have a large number of grade 3s in hand. But it's still better than nothing. So I was able to turn this acrobat into a crit trigger. I'm sorry, heal trigger. I did heal though, so I got like the perfect defensive drive check to bring it back. Excuse me. I believe proto the Marjorie because I had another one in hand. Just like Marjorie plus like all three of them just working in concert together, just showing how strong they can be together. Like Marjorie turning another one into something else. Proto turning Marjorie into guard because I ended up getting this into my soul. It felt really good. It felt very good. And then Eden, had to let Eden go. I believe I saw the over trigger by now, so I knew that was out of play. And then perfect guard this one. I was in a position where I had to figure out if I wanted to go for game, which is what I wanted to do, which is why I tossed the perfect guards for the cost instead of tossing the Marjorie or the Colossus. So that way I went with the bird in hand methodology of, I got these here, let's not try to risk it on 2 random cards off top. And to me, I thought it paid off better because now I got Colossus and Marjorie for just massive power across the board. So now, similar game plan in going second, but probably want to guard a little more aggressively to stay at lower damage here. You really don't need counterblasts until you're final rushing, in my opinion. Maybe you need it for, you can use it for Eden though. You can try to take a damage early for Eden to try to force the issue with him. And I was aggressive here because I just didn't want to wait until later and then give him a target to go after. Got the Bulbalax. Just efficiency right here. Didn't go after my rear guards though. Didn't go hunting. No bully. I got a little ahead of myself here. I realized that I could have used Richard here, which would have changed up, but I chose to just play it out as is since I was already here. Cause I could have went double Eden and really went hunting after the rear guards here. But actually no, I could have called the proto down, but I went full bully to not give them the ability to recover as easily. But if I called down the Eden and didn't rush through things, I could have gotten an additional rear guard pop out the deal. Guard for 2 to pass or over trigger. I thought it was a worthwhile investment. And then just defend against everything and stay at 3 damage. And then getting the Bulbalax off the board is important because it's 18k with Magnolia. And then being able just to aggressively hunt down and tear down the board that they set up really puts you in a strong position against Stoicheia. So it's interesting to see that Darkstate's got like attack base retire through Eden, but it was a very, very welcome addition to the team, no doubt. It's just nice to see some form of comeback potential for defending yourself. Since your deck is so late game focused for Bruce, or later game focused for Bruce, it's very nice to have that ability to stem the bleeding some. And I believe this is a Persona Riot turn. It is not. But I do have the ability to use it if I wanted it to, but I chose not to and chose to go a more value-based turn. And I could use Proto to absorb this and grab something back I grab the heal back, and then I can Marjorie the other Eden into something else. So I went value here just to help survive against the Persona Riot turn, feeling confident enough that I could survive the following turn. I don't think I've seen the overtrigger yet. I can't remember. So the overtrigger was still in play, and that's why I thought it would be better just to go the slower base turn here. But considering I tore their field down and taking that slower turn last time, they rebuilt very nicely. I was hoping they would rip the overtrigger. Because they played Cyrus here. But having that buffer zone here, I went to 23k, which really helped out a lot against the back row attacking. I just let these things go for the most part. Psych. I could have guarded this one too. Surprised I didn't. Surprised I let that go. But I got one back anyway. Calculated. So now this is 23, 23, 33. Will be 33 because I do use this early to filter. I chose to go face with Eden because I was going to go face with Marjorie and push into 5. But get the restand action going. Bruce up. Protobulb really showed the value here because Stoicheia currently doesn't have a way to remove it. So I'm able to constantly turn attackers that just force like 2 or 3 cards out of my opponent's hand into something back into my hand. Hit another heal trigger, which is like backbreaking to Stoicheia. And then I turned the Marjorie into, I think I turned into Eden in my hand or Steve, one of the two. Just to help myself survive a little bit more. Maybe that 5k shield would have come in handy. And then soul wise, 0 soul, so you can't really use lattice from the back row. I think I was trying to defend against the overtrigger here because it had not yet been seen. Give power here, take that, and then defend Eden. Top deck Bruce, which is even more backbreaking than it already was. But there was still an out here with the overtrigger, even if I did see, I think I saw all the heals up to this point. But 6 damage overtrigger just ends the turn here. So it wasn't like completely over by this point. So thankfully the last check wasn't the overtrigger and I was able to escape out this game. It was close though. Oh, it was one off as always. So that'll do it for all the games here tonight. I really hope you enjoyed seeing the Eden, Protobulb, the overtrigger, Marjorie. I personally think these cards are absolutely insane. They offer great tempo, they offer great value. Eden gives a retire method to Bruce, which is very, very needed and very welcome. Protobulb and Eden together just can turn your hand, like you can attack or boost it for a lot in conjunction with some of your other cards and attack for high power, and then you can convert the cards on your board after you've gotten that damage or cards forced out of your opponent's hand into something into your hand to help survive the following turn. And then Protobulb, being able to search your soul for a particular card, really comes in handy with some of the random soul charge elements of Dark States. And then Marjorie is just an all-in-all efficient card for attacking for 23 or 33k. And then something I forgot to mention on the front end is that she can, as long as she exists on the board, she can threaten with that skill because it's not from hand like Colossus is. So all in all, I really do love the cards. The overtrigger is really good as well, threatening with that crit at all times. And I'm very, very happy with the state of Bruce right now. It remains to be seen if the rest of set 1 is going to give some more support for it. But the deck as of now that I used for this particular stream was very solid. And it remains to be seen if things do change, but I'm hopeful for the future and I'm excited for that as well. So I hope you enjoyed. Let me know if you like these style of videos more than stream recaps, because If you like them, I'll continue to do them. If not, then I'll upload the stream replays and let you see them that way. If you're interested in the stream replays, as of the release of this video, the VOD is still up if you want to check out the gameplay there and kind of seeing the banter or the chat and everything. But yeah, let me know how you feel about these, and hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you next time. Peace. Be easy.